So I'm gonna like record some garbage and then pretend that I'm gonna use a video editor later. Probably not going to do that. But this way I can talk and not feel bad. We're gonna go with that. This is, I don't know what this is. The idea was just to start talking about SWAN shit because that's what I'm doing. That's my life now, I guess. um, I did one of these a million years ago with my friend Elena, who I haven't talked to in a long time, but it's one of those like, I haven't talked to you in 6 years. We're still friends. Uh, but she was like the one I made the story for originally, and we got together. Like she showed up at my house in Portland at that point, and she came in from Colorado, and we all just hung the fuck out. It was wild. Um, but she and I sat and had this like dialogue on video that has now been lost to the ages. I don't know what fucking happened to that video. We were intending to upload it to YouTube, but it was long, and at that point, YouTube only let you upload like in 10-minute chunks, and I think that was like if you were special. So you might have even only been 5-minute chunks at that point. Um, so that was another one of those things that I did with like future intent of having a video editor. Yeah. And now people want to talk to me on Tumblr, so maybe I would definitely have a video editor. Who knows? It's amazing. Yeah, okay. Uh, anyhow, so I guess I'm just talking about this. I guess because I'm trying to like actively dissuade people from reading the original. And I think I have a lot of this kind of information attached to the original. There's like a document at the end of the first one uh, that's like an annotated like director's cut of all the dumb shit that I put in there. So it was just like, here's this is part of a real thing that happened to me. This is based on my grandparents' house. This is blah 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 blah. So I had a whole thing and it just went chapter by chapter and broke down fucking everything. And I also just talked a lot about like where all this garbage came from and the like the history of this fucking fanfic. Um, this all seems like more than slightly vain and slightly ridiculous, but like at the same time, I got a lot of people who said they were going to be really excited to listen to me just talk at a camera about this. So that's cool. I'll do that. I enjoy talking. As you may have noticed, me and the words, we're friends. We do a lot of interacting. That's why you probably read like a 300,000 word fanfic. That's why you're enjoying listening to this. But yeah, so the original one was published in 2005. Um, I embarrassingly remember the date specifically. It was February 22nd. I don't like remember that day. I just remember coming back to that date a lot. And eventually, like when I ended it, that was the date that I ended it on, because I was all about like the cyclical nature of this thing. It has a tendency to do this. It just comes back when you need it, and it feeds into you and into itself, and it's nice. It does this. It's good. But it came from a joke, as so many of the things that I am invested in do. So it was. Sorry, I just looked up and realized that there was a thing I wanted to put on this video that is not in the place where I thought it was, which was up there. off in the distance. But I think it's over here. So it's actually closer to me now. We'll get to it. Yeah, this thing started as a joke. A friend of mine brought an 80s night flyer from our school, our college, mind you. We were at the University of Pittsburgh. And it had an advertisement for this 80s party using Gem and the Holograms. And I was like armpits deep in like Johnny and Zim shit at that particular point in time. Um, because I was that kid and it was 2004. Like that's what you do. So I'm marinating in this garbage hardcore, and she shows me this thing, and we, for some reason, we were like, yeah, let's combine it with Johnny as you do. So she she I don't know which one of us took that more literally, because she drew a picture of Jem being murdered. I drew a picture of Johnny as Jem, like singing and with ridiculous earrings and with Nail Bunny as his holographic projecting thing. Um, so I don't know. Then I was very fond of that silly little thing, and so for that whole semester, I was drawing pictures of Johnny and this crew, and that's why they were called the Homicides, because it was something that was relevant to them that began with an H so that it could mimic Gem and the Holograms, Johnny and the Homicides. Um, they've pretty much dropped Johnny and the as far as like the canon for this thing goes, but that's like where that came from. I mean, I don't know if the holograms had been called something else, then like the homicides would have been too. It's just how it worked out. But my original concept for them was a band that performed like against their will in hell. um, so they weren't covered in makeup. They were just literally dead. Um, there was no like backstory to it really. There were no like they're all playing to, you know, make up for their sins or something. Um, Particularly Edgar, who, and Debbie, I think, was also there. Yeah, those two did not do anything nearly as bad as Johnny and Jimmy had. So like, what the fuck were they doing? Yeah, but whatever. I mean, it was just something that I drew like literally on my algebra homework, um, to pass the time, to amuse myself. In the meantime, like simultaneously, um, I was drawing like weird high school drawings. I don't I don't know why. I because I literally never read like a high school AU of anything. Just I was like, why would you do that? Why would you do that, lady? Why have you done this thing? Um, so I'd never read one, so it wasn't like I was the kind of person who found them like deeply compelling or anything. There's glare in my glasses. It was driving me completely mad. Like I'm trying not to be crazy about it, but it's like, did I make it worse? No, I made it slightly better. We're gonna roll with that. I was gonna keep it at the other angle because the painting above me is the homicides, and I felt like that was good, but whatever. Also because it hides that I'm doing this one out wearing a bra. But okay, here we are. So so anyway, I'm doing this little like high school thing over here while the homicides are happily chilling out in my algebra homework, and the high school thing was like it was like loose swan. It was like they were normal and visible. Like there were drawings of high school Johnny with a locker and all that kind of stuff. Eventually, it kind of drifted toward like we're separate somehow. People aren't really interacting with us, but they may have been just like metaphorically invisible. They may have just been like those kids, versus we're literally supernaturally altered to not quite be here. But there were like all these there were all these great things. It was like there was Jimmy, who was like the overly aggressive, um, like Pepe Le Pew kind of shit. Like there's a there's a drawing of him like presenting Johnny with presents, and it was, you got the impression from my 2004 drawing even, which is admittedly significantly worse than like a 2017 drawing would be, yeah, that it was just a common thing that he would just show up with a new like tiny pretty wrapped box, and that Johnny had about had it with the whole situation, but that, you know, Jimmy was very persistent, whatever. And then there was like the first times we see Edgar, you get the idea that he's like a new kid or something, um, and he's fascinated with Johnny, but like I guess not in an obsessive gift giving way. I don't know. Uh, there's a little bit of Debbie, but she's mostly just, she plays a similar role, I guess, as she does in current real Swan. I don't know what to call these things. It's real like really like barely their terms. Um, she's mostly there as like, wow, Edgar, you done fucked up again, and geez, Jimmy, you're fucking creepy. And I don't know that there was, I don't know there was any Tenna in that version, because there was barely any Tenna in the original Swan. Like she wasn't, I wasn't even planning for her to be there, and then somebody asked about her, like 2 or 3 chapters in, and in that version, 2 or 3 chapters in, was still like, we were at Edgar's house alone with Edgar and Johnny, and we were dealing with moving this whole memory plot thing along. So it wasn't until like 5 or 6 chapters in that we even saw Tenna for the first time. Like, let alone even then got a decent established idea of her character or anything. So that was the thing that I did with reSWAN, was like immediately work Tenna in and have her be like there and a concrete part of the group, even if she's not on stage doing shit. So I don't think she was part of the like original weird high school AU thing I had going on. And then that thing, which was like more often in like my history notes or whatever, it's like homicides in algebra and high school in history, or some other class. I distinctly remember that I had that class with my ex-boyfriend. I don't know what the class was, just that he was always sitting next to me, and he was like being responsible and taking notes, and I was drawing Johnny the Homicidal Maniac in several completely implausible scenarios. I don't know. One of us is married now. So he saw a lot of this stuff go down, but I was still keeping it very separate. And even when I started Swan originally, it was intended to be just that original silly high school thing developed somewhat, which is why, like, when you look at the original doodles, you can kind of see them developing into we're invisible and blah blah blah, because I was like literally doting on that. Literally when I started it, like I put down that entire first chapter, there was no homicides as part of the like future equation. That was just not a thing that was going to be happening. The music was there, obviously, maybe not obviously, but it was, and it continued to be. You know, several things in, like, there it was. So it later made sense for the homicides to happen, but since I didn't know they were going to be there from the start, there were some pacing issues and stuff with the original one. Like the biggest thing was like the songs, like their personal songs, the stuff that comes from inside. Those weren't there until chapter 16, where 2007 lady was like, baby's first fanfic, having some pacing problems. So it was like a massive like retroactive info dump, and it had a lot of like, wow, yeah, I didn't quite remember the first time he'd heard these, but this happened then. And so it was basically like dictating a bunch of incidents, like they're fixing up the van and they're teaching Tenna to drive and all of this stuff that I just like went through, in reSWAN. It just was like a paragraph of this is some shit that happened to Edgar, and introduced all the songs at once, and then you maybe saw a line or two of them again. Like in this one, I wanted them to be concrete chunks of it. I wanted you to be able to recognize them, when you saw them a second or third time, to know what they were about and to make them as much a part of what usually Edgar is experiencing as like taste and touch and smell, like just have it be part of the experience of being with these people, so that you could say, oh yeah, like he's kind of fidgeting and his song is doing this, like that those things should all be kind of woven together, and it should just start being a sense that they have and some information that they parse and process without it being like obstructive or difficult to handle, which it is for Edgar at first, because I don't know, imagine that, you're fucking blind and then suddenly one day you can see fucking everything. I mean, I imagine it would be a little overwhelming. Same probably if you've never smelled something before. Like, you say you go nose blind to stuff in your own house. Like, imagine just being dumped into a house where it's like I can smell the laundry and I can smell like the couch and I can smell food cooking and air fresheners, and like it just must be kind of a lot. So that was what I did with the songs the second time around. But the first time it was just like, oh, what? I'm doing songs now? And people were asking me, like, through the first, I don't know how many, 10 of them or something, like, oh, is this going to turn into the homicides thing? And I was like, oh, no, don't be silly. You're wrong. Because then it did turn into that. And I think it was just because I wanted them to be together. Like, I didn't really want to have two completely fucking weird AUs of Johnny. Joke's on me. How many of these do I have now? But at the time, I was trying to consolidate. And it's again weird because it's like, okay, you were working in the songs from the beginning. How were you not also working in like the... Cool, I've never heard that noise before. How were you not also working in like the magical band? Like what, how were you not doing that? But whatever the case was, I worked it in, and they showed up in like chapter 16 out of 20. So they had 4 chapters to go, and I guess if sometimes some of this feels obvious to say, but then I keep thinking, no, I'm trying to encourage people not to read the original, so it's good to assume that they haven't read it. The original version of the story had Johnny and Edgar not actually like getting together and being a thing until like chapter 17, beginning of chapter 18, again out of 20, and chapter 19 ended with Johnny dying. So like they had a real small window of investment or anything, and like they'd clearly been like friends and maybe like kind of toying with being really close or something, but because Johnny was like not as great a human being, the relationship didn't work out as well. Like I'm like sinking into my couch. It wasn't as healthy. The like super strong chemistry wasn't quite there. Like when I started the new one, I made some little changes to them as people. Like the original Swan Johnny was a lot more distant, was a lot weirder in a bad way. It was probably weirder like in an accurate way, in like a too edgy for you teenager kind of way, but he was just too he was too distant and not quite like human enough. Uh, Part of that was because the fandom for Johnny in general, not just like the weird niche zones that I ended up in, but like the Johnny world at large was like not real friendly. Imagine that, right? They were not real friendly specifically though to like slash content. So it's amazing. I was like, so many of them were perfectly happy with him being with Debbie, but as soon as you put him with Edgar or Jimmy, as some people did, it was like he's asexual. Like there's layers of things happening there, and I'm like trying to address them all in order in my brain, and it's all kind of misfiring, which is why there was that stop. Um, they were all using, they were conflating like asexual and aromantic at the time, or combining them, I guess, is what they were all doing. So they were like, oh, he can't even have a romantic relationship with these people because he's not going to have sex with them. And we all know that isn't how things work now, but 2005. There were also like a hell of a lot of like super like masculine dudes who had decided to, I don't know, like adopt Johnny as like this pillar of hyper masculinity something too. I think he was, there were a lot of like 2005 fedoras who were very fond of him, as I think what the deal was, and they were appalled by the idea that he could be not heterosexual. So people were really shitheads about everything. So my plan with Swan Johnny was to make it obvious at like every step of the road, including some that were inappropriate, that I had read the source material. Because that was the thing too. We used to get all this accusation of like, first it was like, you're girls, you haven't read the source material. Then it was like, you didn't understand the source material. And there was a lot of you're doing it wrong, basically. And so I think a lot of us felt the need to defend that we had in fact read and enjoyed the source material for exactly what it was. We're just over here playing now. That was also why we were hiding on a Yahoo group in 2005. This little piece of hair is driving me crazy. Okay. So Johnny, he was a lot more distant. He was a lot colder. And then weirdly, because I was so concerned about not making him like emotional or trying to make hand motions to inspire the words that I want, and I'm not getting them. It was like squishy or something. Like I was like, oh, if I just make him like this, like cold, unfeeling, like enigmatic monolith of a person, then that will surely satisfy the people who are being nasty, that I haven't understood him or something. He's significantly more of an asshole in the first version. But he's also not really willing to entertain that very much. Like the reSWAN Johnny says that he's an asshole more often, but is also less of one. So I don't know. Anyway, though, he was so distant and so cold and so difficult to do anything with. Like anytime I had him do something like gentle or cute or loving or whatever, I felt like I immediately had to negate it with something like a complete freak out of nowhere. So that it was like, look, I read the comics. Weird. Now he's better. Because it's like, well, if you read the comics, you'd see that he is kind of like hyperactive and cute occasionally, and is obviously not hyper masculine or anything of that nature. He gets called girl and people assume he's gay. Like he's clearly not a high model of like traditional masculinity or any of that bullshit, which is a lot of what fueled, I want to say it's a lot of what fueled like me deciding to make him non-binary, but it feels like it was always that way. I've said this before a million times, and I think everyone who's watching this has heard me say that I've said this a million times, so it's probably useless to point it out. But I used to say all the time when I was doing this that the homicides was like 2 guys and 2 girls and Johnny. And it was like mostly a joke or something, but I think it was set out of some kind of frustration that I couldn't pin down and that I definitely did not have the vocabulary for. I didn't have any of the vocabulary for the asexuality either. Um, and that was a detriment both to me personally and to Johnny, but I guess it was the non-binary thing, really. Um, but the one affects me a lot more, the other one affects me only slightly. Anyway, so this is like maybe the third time I've attempted to move on from this concept. He was just like too hard and mean and weird, and Edgar was a little, he was like too timid and too cautious and too letting things happen to him. So there might have been like a weird like, oh cool, we remember things or whatever, but there, and even like, hey, I live in your house because that's what I do. But there wasn't like a super instant connection. It wasn't like it was in reSWAN where it startled the hell out of me, because by like increasing the amount of Johnny's humanity and increasing the amount of like spine that Edgar has, it was like bam. It was like this instant like we are 5,000% great for each other. And when I was writing it, I was like, shit, how the hell am I going to keep you guys away from each other until like damn near the end of the story? And then I thought, I don't have to do that. I just do it over again and do it the way that it clearly is better. So that was like this time, like they get together well before any of this whole band nonsense happens, and they realize that there's murder between them after they've already gotten together, and so then that's like a traumatic incident that they have to like work through. The original, like they've known all this stuff for a really long time, and then even then, like the getting together, it's a little bit of like fake dating to hit up like some fanfic tropes, which is something I also decided I was going to do with the original Swan. I was like, let me hit as many weird fanfic tropes as I possibly can. That's my first fanfic. What a great idea. What the hell were you doing, 2005 lady? What was your idea? But anyway, so they were doing fake dating, but Edgar didn't know that. So that was the sad. It was like Johnny thought it was something to do with an image for the band. Like he thought it was a thing like, hey, why don't we pretend to date and really piss off all those weird fangirls? And Johnny was like, A+, well done. Let's do that. And Edgar didn't mean it that way, and didn't know that Johnny didn't mean it his way. And so they're just like happily trucking along until like they're at home in private, and Edgar is still doing what he would have done in front of the cameras and stuff, and Johnny is just like, lol, wow, this is some hardcore method acting you've got going on here. And it takes him like a few misfired shots to figure out, oh shit, you're not acting, you thought this was real all along. And then they have to go through a bunch of stuff, and it's Edgar trying to like slowly convince Johnny that this is cool, which is fine. Like there's some appeal in that, but I think what ultimately happened with reSWAN was better. I think that about every aspect of it, honestly, but that little bit of Edgar trying to convince Johnny that he's cool, he's fine, this is a great idea, again, super short, because if they're getting together, like in chapter 17 or 18 of 20, this is clearly like a narrow window of time to be doing anything. And in the new one, like he's convincing Johnny that he's good and he's a-okay, like almost literally from go. So it's a more satisfying like level of growth and attachment, and that's been a problem also. As I'm doing this, I'm not rewriting, but like making notes for an attempt to rewrite ish, and it's gonna have to be like a totally different story, because Edgar and Johnny are so much closer, and the relationship is so much stronger and like more genuine and like more properly a relationship that you don't even question as healthy. There's no one worried about Edgar. Um, no one who sees him daily and has good reason to worry or anything. Like there's nothing that even really looks questionable. So there's a lot of aspects to Ish that have to be totally redone. But since this isn't a video about Ish, that's just like a random note. This has reached half an hour, and I'm wondering if I should break this up into pieces. I think I might do that. We're gonna do that.